Welcome to another episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, where certified financial planner Lauren Sherman shares thoughts on having a healthy mind, body, and spirit, an abundance of wealth inside portfolios and out, and lessons learned from clients and mentors over the years.
Welcome in to another Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement. As always, I am your host, Lauren Sherman. Typically, these podcast episodes are all about looking forward, thinking through different strategies we can use to improve our retirement outlook in the future. And while I try to offer a few action steps with every episode I record, I also know that it's easy to have the best of intentions, but then life gets in the way and we don't always follow through with any action. I've been guilty of this too, particularly when I challenged myself to read 50 books per year. This was something I had done in the past, and it's tempting to finish one book and jump right into the next. But I had to ask myself, what's the point of reading a bunch of books if I don't really put any of the ideas into action and there is no change on my end? So I had to adjust my behavior a bit, slow down, and jot down a few key thoughts from each chapter as I would read. Of course, you wouldn't do this if you are reading a book purely for enjoyment, perhaps an autobiography or a fiction book, but typically the books that excite me the most revolve around my business, self-improvement, and so on. So it's with that idea that I thought it would be a good exercise to go back and offer a quick recap of the key points from each episode I recorded in 2022. Some of you will love this because it's a year's worth of episodes condensed all into just one listen. Others perhaps had different takeaways altogether, so I will be interested to hear what resonates with you as we take this journey looking back upon the past year. And I guess last, reviewing past episodes often helps ignite new ideas for future episodes. So selfishly, I'm hoping this year in review will help jumpstart the agenda for 2023. But all in all, the main purpose of this review is to think through where perhaps we intended to take action or make changes, but we never did so. Hopefully, this will be a final nudge in the right direction to take that action step so that we can start off 2023 on the right foot. So without further ado, let's jump into our year in review of 2022. We started off the year with an episode called Let's Get Clear About Fees. This was a fun one to start off with because it's a little bit of a soapbox topic for me. It's also why we designed our firm in such a unique way that virtually no other firms in Iowa have the same fee structure as us, and even nationwide, still very few firms have caught onto this trend. To me, this is one area of the financial planning industry that still falls into the category of out of sight, out of mind. I've been banging this drum for years now, but we still have to do a better job of shining a light on the fee conversation. I have seen time and time again, people get caught up in the phrase fee only, which can be a good place to start, but that's only part of the conversation. In this episode, we talk through several types of fees, along with the often overlooked expense ratio that can act as a bit of a hidden fee that goes unnoticed. At least it goes unnoticed from the investor's perspective, but it certainly does not go unnoticed when you look at the impact that it has on the growth of your accounts over time. If I can give you one takeaway from the conversation we had about fees, it would be to take the first step and do a simple fee audit. If you'd like a fee audit of your own plan, I've included a link in the show notes that you can't miss as it's appropriately labeled fee audit, and our team would be happy to share with you your results. The second episode that we kicked off the year 2022 with was called Goals. For those who are detail-oriented, this episode laid out 10 steps to finding and creating your goals that will have sticking power for the upcoming year. Even if you don't care to be that organized about it, simply listening through this structured format hopefully helped you brainstorm some impactful goals that you'd like to accomplish. I think the biggest takeaway from this episode is to just set aside time to make goal setting an actual event. Everyone has good intentions to start out a new year and make positive changes, but being intentional about it, thinking through and then writing down your ideas, this can be the difference between a great idea that you forgot to follow through with versus an actual plan that you worked toward and helped make real life changes. We headed into February with a fun episode called Where Are You Still Using Single Ply? This one offered a nice balance from our previous goals episode. Instead of thinking about all of the positive results that could come from setting intentional goals, sometimes we think of goals as boring or needing a lot of discipline. Our question of where are you still using single ply, which of course is referring to single ply toilet paper, this episode went the other direction, encouraging you to think about how you spend your money and how could you upgrade or put more dollars to the things that matter most in your life. Where are you being overly frugal when you don't need to be? A couple of examples that our author Tim Ferriss brought to mind included improving the sheets on your bed for a better night's sleep, as well as spending $100 on a great pair of jeans that you love instead of spending the same for 3 pairs that you only kind of like. Sometimes it's the small changes that have a big impact, especially when it's something that we use on a daily basis. The action step here is an easy one, as we created a cheat sheet to help you brainstorm which areas of your life you could direct more or less of your dollars toward, with the goal of aligning your spending with what's most important to you. Next, we jumped into a 2-part review of the book Happy Money: The Science of Smarter Spending. This one was a lot of fun, even though the original idea was never to turn this into a podcast episode. But as I was reading through this book just for my own enjoyment, I realized that it was full of lessons that anyone could apply to their retirement. After all, many of us work our whole lives for this big nest egg that we retire with, but we don't tend to put a lot of thought into how we can convert these dollars to maximize our happiness. In a lot of ways, that's kind of the purpose for saving in the first place, right? The real action step here is to understand that even though money doesn't exactly buy happiness, you can get closer to true happiness by spending your money in better ways. We covered 3 of which in this episode. First, we should buy experiences instead of things. This means putting dollars towards a vacation or an evening out instead of a new toy. Second, we should make it a special treat instead of an everyday occurrence. For example, birthday cake would lose its luster if we had it every day instead of enjoying it exclusively on birthdays. And third, spend money to buy time. This might involve finding ways to cut down on your work commute, hiring someone to clean your house or mow your lawn, or eliminate other non-happiness producing activities. There's probably going to be a common theme regarding action steps for these episodes, as I would suggest a great first step would be to review the cheat sheet and put the 3 principles we just talked about into action. I know for me personally, it would serve me well to revisit this episode from time to time. In our next episode, we wrapped up part 2 of Happy Money: The Science of Smarter Spending. In this one, we covered the last 2 principles discussed in this book. Principle number 4 is to pay now, consume later. Think of this as the opposite of how a credit card works. Instead of getting something immediately and then receiving the bill later, psychologically it's better to pay up front and wait for your reward. Think about paying in advance for a vacation. Not only do you get the enjoyment of the vacation itself, but you experience the anticipation of the upcoming event without worrying about paying for it, since that step is already done. And finally, principle number 5, invest in others. Studies show that giving benefits the donor as much as it does the recipient of the gift. Not only can this bring great joy, but it can also release feelings of dependency and stress that sometimes are associated with money. It's been said that the best way to determine if you own your money or if your money owns you is to give it away. If you have no problem giving freely, you own your money. But if you cannot do this, perhaps your money owns you. Our next episode was titled 7 Commonly Asked Questions, as I had a bunch of listener questions that I thought others would find helpful, but I wasn't sure we needed a full episode to cover each one. You will have to go back and listen to or print off the cheat sheet if you want to see the answers for each, but zipping through our list, our first question was, what makes your firm different from others? Of course, this is a passion of mine, as it's the whole reason I decided to start Integrity Wealth Management. So even though I could have talked on forever about this one, I stayed focused with just 3 key differences. Our next 2 questions included, does it make sense to divide our assets between multiple advisors so we are not putting all of our eggs in one basket? And, if my investments are going down, should I bail out? Or similarly, if my investments have gone up, should I lock in a gain? Moving on to question 4 and 5, I always find this comical, but occasionally we are asked, how can your fees be so much less than other advisors? And other times we are asked, why are your fees so high? Whenever there is a discussion around fees, I think it's important to ask, first off, compared to what? And secondly, what value am I getting in return for those fees? If you are a do-it-yourselfer, fees of any kind might be viewed as too much. If you take a different approach and view an advisor as a trusted employee or a trusted partner, you might think of the fee you are paying as an annual salary, and perhaps it looks like a great deal from that perspective. We close out by asking if being a fiduciary is really that important and how we work with others who you might introduce to our firm, regardless of how much money they may have. I think the action step from this episode is to challenge yourself to re-evaluate professional relationships from time to time, including that with your financial advisor. Just because a change might make sense doesn't mean that a mistake was made in the past. It might just mean that you are in a different phase of your life and perhaps different professionals are better suited to help. Let's move into our next episode called 5 Tax Planning Opportunities. I enjoyed this episode as it gave me a chance to geek out with some tax planning conversation, as I feel this is really one of the ways we have excelled over what other investment firms offer. The first opportunity involved using a tax return to back solve for what was spent in the past year. The second opportunity involves capital gains and losses, so we can harvest these gains or losses within your portfolio at the end of each year to legally avoid paying taxes on gains or to reduce your taxable income. The third opportunity discusses charitable gifting and how to stretch your gift if you are someone who is fortunate enough to be able to help others with the money you've saved. The fourth opportunity is to pinpoint if and when a Roth conversion makes sense and helps determine exactly how much should be converted. This is simply a matter of taking a tax-deferred asset that you have not yet paid taxes on and converting it into a tax-free asset that is protected regardless of what might happen with future tax rates. And finally, the fifth opportunity is a matter of reviewing Schedule B for any assets we have not taken into consideration. The analogy I always use is that if our retirement plan was a puzzle, and we dump that puzzle onto the kitchen table, we would want to be certain that we have all of the pieces before we get started. It's not going to be a very good-looking puzzle if we only had half of the pieces, and in the same way, having half of the financial information isn't going to make for a very good retirement plan either. The action step here is to make sure you or your financial advisor is competent and well-versed with incorporating tax planning into your retirement planning. Our next episode was another book review, this one with the title, What If God Wrote Your Bucket List? I'm repeating myself when I say this, but this was a fun episode as it was just another opportunity to highlight that our firm is not the right fit for everyone, but instead I get to speak to an audience and only those who really connect and resonate with the message tend to raise their hand and reach out to us. In 2023, I plan to bring on between 6 to 8 new retiree clients. And it's not because we don't have the capacity and an amazing team to bring on many more than that, but it's simply that we really want to focus on working with those where the mutual fit is so obvious that it seems silly if we wouldn't work together. Of course, by only bringing on a select few clients each year, it allows us to spend the majority of our time with clients who have already trusted us to be good stewards of their finances. And really, at the end of the day, that is what's most important. Getting back on track with this episode, What If God Wrote Our Bucket List? Our author, Jay Payleitner, talks through 52 God-centered principles to mull over, and we highlight just 16 of these on this episode. With lessons taken from Matthew, Luke, Romans, Proverbs, and so on, a few of the 52 principles include drive through the storm, be last in line, reconsider rules carved in stone, don't put God in a box, bounce off brick walls, and redefine vacation. This was just a small sample of the wisdom Jay shares in his book, so this one is definitely worth revisiting. I think the action step here is to take a step back from your daily routine and recognize what is most important in your life. With this perspective, change often follows. Moving into our next episode, this one turned out to be appropriate considering market conditions at the time, but will also serve as an important reminder for future market turbulence, as this one was called Timing the Market. In this episode, we covered 6 reasons why market timing is not in your best interest. And because it's challenging to simply avoid or eliminate something, particularly if you were already involved with market timing in your own portfolio, we also added 6 helpful alternatives to market timing. A few of these involve, first, getting very clear on your purpose for your retirement dollars. Second, visually thinking of your assets in different buckets so that you can see it's only your longer-term assets that have those wild fluctuations. And third, set up rules or guardrails to determine when you will make changes, which takes emotion out of the equation. You will have to check out that episode or view the cheat sheet to see the last 3 alternatives, but my action step here would be to keep this handy and review it whenever you feel the urge to make adjustments to your plan based on what the market is doing. Let's move into our next episode titled Social Security Part 1. I'm realizing I must have gotten distracted with some other ideas as I never did circle back and complete a Part 2, so perhaps that will be on the list for 2023. At any rate, we start off this episode by talking through 3 different Social Security scenarios and how each situation could lead to a different claiming recommendation. We then jump into a 10-question quiz as a fun way to challenge your Social Security knowledge. A few of the questions include, do my benefits increase with inflation? If my spouse passes away before I do, will I receive both of our benefits? And if I have younger children under the age of 18, can they start receiving payments based on my own Social Security benefit when I start collecting? The answer to that last one may surprise you, so it's definitely worth checking out if you happen to have children under the age 18 and you are 62 or older yourself. While this was a fun episode, the real takeaway is that Social Security can be confusing, and it's a once-per-lifetime decision, so it's important to discuss your options with a professional who can help. Let's close out today's episode with our 2-part review of annuities. This series was called The Many Colors of Annuities. In Part 1, we covered income annuities with a couple of stories highlighting how these can work out to your benefit when properly structured. We moved into deferred annuities next, as these are more commonly used within retirement planning today. We covered the first 2 types of deferred annuities, called fixed annuities and indexed annuities. In our cheat sheet, we highlight the pros and cons of each type to help you determine if an annuity is a good fit as part of your retirement plan. This can be a helpful reference as people tend to polarize annuities as either the best solution ever or a horrible thing to get into. The truth is often found somewhere in the middle, as it's more determined by your situation than a one-size-fits-all statement. Last, let's cover Part 2 of The Many Colors of Annuities. In this episode, we continue to highlight the pros and cons of each type of annuity as we cover 2 more, variable annuities and then long-term care annuities. As a spoiler alert, variable annuities were the only on this list that overwhelmingly tend to be a poor fit for retirees, while the rest each have their place and time. We closed out our annuity series with 3 common annuity-related questions. The first, how are annuities taxed? Our second question, are annuities FDIC insured or guaranteed in some way? And finally, with full transparency in mind, our third question discusses annuity commissions. Once again, there is a lot of great content to help you see the pros and cons of each type of annuity, but if you are considering an annuity in your own plan, it's best to get feedback from a fiduciary advisor before signing any paperwork, particularly since annuities tend to be long-term commitments. I thought I would be able to cover a year's worth of content in just one episode, but it looks like we're going to have to hold off for a Part 2 coming soon to finish this up. With that said, as we have looked backwards upon the year 2022, or at least half of it, that begs the question, what do we have in store for 2023? Well, first and foremost, I want to keep these episodes client-focused, so we are going to keep most of them with retirees in mind, particularly questions that retirees ask. In fact, that is where the majority of episodes begin, is with a simple question from one of our clients or listeners. If I hear a question once, I typically just answer it. If I hear a question twice, it's getting my wheels turning and I start to ask myself if others would have the same question and maybe they're just not asking it. And if I hear a question 3 times or more, then I make a note and I create an episode that addresses that question. Beyond focusing topics around the questions retirees have, I would like the majority of episodes to stand the test of time so that if you revisit these episodes in a few years, they will still be helpful. That is part of the reason why I don't do your typical market commentary or talk about buy and sell opportunities. By the time you would listen to that episode, it's likely the content would already be outdated. But instead, if we discuss inflation or market dips such as a recession, and we keep the conversation based in principles to act on under any decade, then you can come back to this content in the future. Life tends to be cyclical, so if you wait long enough, most topics become relevant once again. One wrinkle that I think could spice up future episodes would be to include more interviews. This way, you're not only hearing from me, but we could interview an author rather than just review their book. With that same thought, we could interview a CPA for tax advice, and perhaps even other advisors or retirees themselves to hear from a different perspective. I already have one interview scheduled for 2023 with Gavin Jerome, who talks about surviving the chaos culture and the importance of laughter. I had the opportunity to hear Gavin talk, and I'm sure you will love my discussion with Gavin, and I will do my best to bring other interviews into the mix too. With that said, let me know if there's a topic or specific person you'd like to hear interviewed on the show, and I will do my best to make that happen. That will do it for today, but be sure to make use of everything I've linked in the show notes for today so that you can take action on what we've discussed. Find past episodes at healthywealthywiseretirement.com, and we will connect again in just 2 weeks to finish up this review of 2022.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, we would love if you took a quick moment to leave an honest review. Of course, we're shooting for 5 stars, but if you have suggestions to improve the show, we would love to hear from you too. Just click on the podcast name, Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, and scroll down to ratings and review. Thanks again for your support, as this helps us reach a wider audience and help even more retirees just like you. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Lauren Sherman is a certified financial planner and co-owner of Integrity Wealth Management, an investment advisor serving retirees in search of their own healthy, wealthy, and wise retirement lifestyle.